The internet is full of rabbit holes. Some are funny, some are pointless, and some are just weird late night distractions you forget about in the morning. But then there are the others. The ones that don't feel like accidents. The ones that feel intentional. The ones that lead you down a dark path. From a man building his own computer system from scratch, and ends up with him convinced it was a way to talk to God, to a missing persons case that somehow spirals into a massive network of websites that are nothing short of horrifying. Today, we're diving into some unhinged internet rabbit holes. Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel, and let's get into it. 9-Apple Pineapple. The news fills up with headlines of tragedies every single week. After time, a lot of us can become numb to it. Another victim, another day. It's sad, but it's true. We may think about it for a couple of hours and then the feeling fades. But what happens when disaster strikes just around the corner? When it happens to our neighbors? When it's down the street? Or just next door? This is how the residents of Woombye in Queensland, Australia felt on December 7th, 2003. The day that a young boy named Daniel Morcombe left home around 2 p.m. and never returned. Just 2 weeks before Christmas, Daniel was waiting for a bus into town so he could buy some presents for his family. His day took a turn when the bus broke down before his stop. And then the replacement bus was so behind schedule that it didn't stop for him. Daniel was patient and had no issue waiting, but that wasn't his problem. The problem was that he had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time, because at the same time, Brett Peter Cohen was driving along the road. He stopped and asked Daniel if he needed a ride, which sounds nice until his true intentions came to light. Brett had already been convicted of crimes against young people, yet not enough that it kept him off the streets. If he had been held in prison like he deserved, maybe what happened to Daniel wouldn't have happened. But sadly, it did. Instead of buying Christmas gifts on December 7th, Daniel was assaulted and murdered. The thing is though, this took a long time for law enforcement to figure out. They didn't arrest Brett until 2011, 8 years later. In that time, Daniel became one of the most investigated crimes in Australia's history. There were hundreds of thousands of dollars in rewards to find him, and the whole country sat biting their nails in hopes he would return home, safe and sound. Especially the people of Queensland. Even after the case was put to rest and the family got justice, this story stuck. Residents of Woombye and neighbors of the Morcombes couldn't stop wondering how something so horrific could have happened so close. Now, of course, that's a normal reaction, but some thought about it more than others, maybe a little too much. In fact, they were fixated, obsessed, even tormented. So much so that they created an entire web ring that was dedicated to Daniel and his life. The first person to notice this was Custom Slaps 659. They posted on r/RBI, very confused and honestly concerned. And the post reads as follows: accidentally discovered this creepy collection of websites. Now I think it might be linked to minor abduction. Hello. A couple of years ago, when looking for potential domains for a project, I stumbled across the following website. This website immediately links to Wishing, which in turn leads to a huge collection of different domains. The website includes a vast amount of images and cryptic text that initially appears to be some benign gibberish. However, this one website leads to an entire collection of domains, each with a unique set of images which appear to all be centered around the theme of a series of minor abductions in Queensland, Australia. I will share more about this in detail to follow. I am not able to find anything that discusses these websites, which was striking to me considering the amount of effort that seems to have gone into this. There are about 30 to 40 web pages across a dozen different domain names, each as complex as the one linked above. Additionally, having been visiting this website intermittently throughout the past year, it seems as though there are continuous changes and updates, each of which are not minor and involve an entirely new set of images and pages. The websites contain numerous references to Daniel Morcombe and William Tyrrell. Now that description is more than enough to get me to click on the link attached, but I don't know that it gave me a proper warning for what I was about to see. Because the first website I go on is nuts. It's like staring at a puzzle with a million different pieces. I don't even know where to start. Benign gibberish, as the post says, is a light way to describe it. But there is so much more. The post wasn't lying when he said there was a huge collection of websites attached. Just one page of this website leads to 5 more, and then those lead to 5 more, and it just keeps going and going. And the deeper it goes, I'm just hoping I'll find some sort of explanation, but it just makes less and less sense. There continues to be a lot of themes about pineapples, missing ones, and a lot of numbers that don't really add up to anything of value. Then a lot of talk about Mrs. Notfear, a recurring character in whatever this is. Sometimes when mentioned, there's a picture alongside it of a life-size mannequin that's dressed in a bright pink nun costume, along with sunglasses and a long black wig that's styled into 2 braids. What this represents or who this is unclear, to say the least. The only explanation I could find on any website was this: I am Mrs. Notfear, the mother and number nun of Queensland. From my bottom came the son of Queensland. I told him to go away, but the son of Queensland will always return. He is always embarrassing me, pretending to be a stuffed pineapple in a wheelchair who can't support us anymore. So that doesn't help us much, but clearly whoever this is based out of Queensland and has some interest in pineapples, which is important to note for 2 reasons. For one, Queensland is where Daniel was murdered, and also the bus stop that he was kidnapped at was about 1 mile from a tourist attraction known as none other than the Big Pineapple. So already, this is connected to Daniel, but it becomes more evident when I start to notice there's photos of him hidden everywhere, in the letters and in the background of photos. It's almost subtle, but the creepiness is not. It's not just the pictures that are a bit freaky. Again, it's all the themes about the missing people and how the writer talks about them. Like this one picture of an old, rusty black car. Nothing special, except for the words written over top of it. Have you seen this car in Queensland? This is the naughty car who took away all the little ones away from Queensland. This was something that caught the eyes of other viewers who were also trying to figure this out. Like the post that I read earlier said, Daniel was not the only case mentioned. There is also a lot of talk about William Tyrrell, a 3-year-old child that went missing in 2014. This happened pretty far away from Queensland, in Kendall, New South Wales, but in Australia, regardless. Unlike Daniel, William was never found, and neither were any remains. Law enforcement eventually just presumed him dead, but during the investigation, there were 2 vehicles of interest, a white station wagon, and an older style gray sedan. 2 cars that repeatedly show up on these websites. Of course, the description that police give is vague, and there are lots of cars that could fit that, but it's enough that having a picture of a car even similar to that on the site is suspicious, especially with the cryptic talk of it being what took the kids away from Queensland. Like, even if it's not about William, it's still incredibly shady. It's enough to freak people out, really freak them out. So they start really digging in order to find out who's behind all of this. Well, besides the name Mrs. Knopfier being mentioned 1,000 times, the names David Smith and John Christopher pops up a lot. After some searching, you'll find an article from ABC Queensland about David Smith, a local resident who wanted to help the RFDS, a service that provides aeromedical care to the state. But what's important is that the article mentions that David Smith decided to try and raise thousands of dollars for this, along with the help of his carer, John Christopher. In the article is a picture of David, one that actually shows up on these sites often. So once people finally had some sort of identity for who is behind all of this, it gave an opportunity to find some real answers as to what the hell was going on. Because the article implied that David is disabled to some capacity. Users decided to email John Christopher with their questions. His response was this: "Hello. 9Apple was a trademark I applied for around 1997. The Apple Computer Company of California unsuccessfully attempted to prevent me registering it in 1998. I was using it as a fundraising character for the Royal Flying Doctor Service, then for the Multiple Handicapped Association of Queensland, and for the Daniel Morcombe Association from 2009. The foundation is working on a movie called Where is Daniel Movie, and offered to include fundraising helpers in the movie. I have been authorized by Daniel's parents to arrange projects for their causes. I have more sites than I can remember, but mostly focusing on missing kids. My latest site is Police Circus. Most of my sites are not promoted, and I use them for future reference to my endeavor to produce a movie, Missing Figures. William Tyrrell is still missing from New South Wales, not Queensland, and they need all the attention they can get to continue their search. It took 10 years to find Daniel. My sites have been around since 1998, and only now am I receiving my first inquiries. You are one of 6 inquiries recently. We'll answer more if required. Kind regards, Jonathan." But that's not it. There were others who emailed questions. There were a lot of questions to be asked. Another email sent to him mentioned all the attention this got on Reddit and other platforms, and he responded like this: "I've just gone through the Reddit Investigation Bureau circus on 9Apple Pineapple and Mrs. Knopfier. Very interesting, but I see them as being the abusers because they are the ones portraying kids in their warped imaginations and egging each other on with their fantasies, stirring up people who could set out to do something bad to minors. In other words, it is their own voyeuristic approach playing amateur detectives when we have professionals to deal with such. There are no complaints from the people they have posted my photos of. There has been no one popping around to see me. The police know what I do. They are not investigating me. I am a retired youth and disability support worker dealing with minors on ICE, depressed, missing, etc. The police have handed me kids to help them because I know my job and I have a good track record dealing with kids' welfare since 1982 in Queensland. Now, some people accepted this as a nice, relieving conclusion to this big mystery, even going as far as commending him for his passion and desire to help kids. Some even continued to talk with him, In fact, they developed a sort of friendship with him. When having back and forth email conversations, he revealed more about the purpose of the sites. He's mentioned to me a few times that the websites are my therapy. He never meant for them to be viewed by anyone, but this all just sort of happened, lol. He's fine with it though. He's happy all the hype is over. As of yesterday, he told me he had 50,000 views on one of his sites. Crazy stuff. Okay, so I definitely agree with the last part of that comment. It is crazy stuff. And that's what makes it so hard to wrap my mind around John's explanation. Therapy makes sense. That's understandable. Watching kids go missing in your own neighborhood can be deeply upsetting, and everyone deserves an outlet to process that. But what about the other reasonings? He says these sites were supposed to be used as fundraising strategies for multiple things, including getting the Where is Daniel movie made. Two things are confusing about that statement. First off, he says pretty much right after that these sites were never meant to be promoted. Well, how is someone fundraising for something without promoting it? But besides that, how in the world would these sites possibly attract anyone into supporting any foundation? Not only are they objectively creepy and disturbing, they don't even make sense. At no point while looking through Big Pineapple did I ever think it was meant to be promoting anything, let alone helping to find missing kids. I don't know. After reading those comments, I went back and did a double and triple take on everything I just went through. And nowhere did I see a passion for helping children. Maybe distraught over what happened to kids like Daniel and William, hopelessness at stories like that, and trying to find a way to make sense of it. If John had just said everything was therapy, this would be more believable, but trying to play it off as a promotional tool just makes zero sense. But he's not making the movie up. There was a movie titled Where is Daniel that was in pre-production. It was to be based on a book written by Daniel's parents and backed by the Heritage Foundation. They unfortunately never got the amount of money needed to make the movie, so they couldn't proceed because of that. So it's a real thing, and John does mention it often on his sites, kind of at least. In the middle of all the gibberish, he has a picture of a boy about to walk into a large pineapple with the text saying, "The Smart State movie is about the little ones who are missing. Day for Daniel, featuring real Queensland pineapples, numbers, and people." And then on the photo it says, "No, Daniel, don't enter the big pineapple." He never actually says the real name of the movie, Where's Daniel, or the fact that it was produced by the Heritage Foundation, not Smart State Movie. At no point does he use actual media from the movie. And on top of that, his name is never mentioned in any article about it. Daniel's parents only really mention Rod Hopping and Tony Abbott as supporting the film. It's not like anything on the sites would actually be helpful in promotion anyways, but it doesn't seem like the Morcombes are even aware that they exist. All this to say, there were plenty of people that weren't buying the email John sent. Most of the attention surrounding 9Apple was in 2019, but it never really went away because new sites have been made and the old sites keep getting updated, and it's never gotten any less crazy or any more normal, leading some to still feel concerned. On February 10th, 2026, user NoOven315 brought it back into the light on r/Internet Mysteries. Their post reads as follows. Unresolved 20-plus year web ring possibly connected to missing minors in Australia, constantly updated since 2003. I'm resurfacing an old unresolved rabbit hole that has appeared online multiple times over the last decade and has never been fully mapped or really debunked. It concerns a large connected web ring of domains that has existed since the late 1990s and continues to update and redirect into itself. The content is not static or abandoned. Pages change, images rotate, and new domains appear while older ones remain live. One of the central entry points is Big Pineapple, which has been active since at least 2001 and redirects into the same network. Also, if you type Ghislaine Maxwell, it results in a redirect into the same web ring. This has been included in the Epstein files of an email from Isabel Maxwell emailing Jeffrey Epstein asking to make it disappear and that no one can see it. Archive data shows that in 2003, the main domain hosted multiple adult content amongst others, before later transitioning into minor themed material. Since then, the network has continued to expand and update. I'm not exactly sure how this user found the Ghislaine Maxwell site because I never came across it on the other sites, but thank God they did, because it's only more blaring evidence that something is way off here. And actually, just 2 months later from when the post was made, the site is now inactive. It looks like John put the domain back up for sale. Luckily, it remains accessible on the Wayback Machine, where I can see how insane this site is. Somehow, even crazier and chilling than the others. There's 2 boxes of text that really freak me out. Over top a picture of 2 people in a living room, it says, "I think they're onto us about the Lady Ghislaine site and the reborn doll tracking. Get rid of the wishing car, and there's a house across the road from the Queensland Laboratory Center for Missing Dolls. Boris trafficking his sister Molly? I don't think so, but be prepared." Then next to that is a photo of Mrs. Naufir and other mannequin characters that look like they're straight out of a horror movie. Here it says, "Just play dumb and we can pull through this." Those words are honestly haunting, and it makes the emails that he sent with a dumb explanation horrifying. But what's even scarier is what the previous post said. It was mentioned in the Epstein files. Possibly the most disturbing and bone-chilling sight out of all of these is in the most notoriously sinister list of emails. It's genuinely terrifying. Yes, even when people point out that the domain wasn't owned by John until after the email from Isabel Maxwell was sent in 2011, even if that's evidence that this wasn't the site she was talking about, the whole thing just doesn't sit well. In or out of the files, Ghislaine Maxwell is more than unsettling. It's deeply disturbing. It's straight out of a nightmare. The whole thing is creepy. The random numbers and the mannequins dressed up, the baby dolls, then the hundreds of pictures of real minors all holding up pineapples, all holding up the number 3 for some reason. It's just hard to explain how eerie this all is. Of course, there's the speculation that this all stems from mental illness, and hopefully that is just the case. That's the most reasonable scenario that would be the least harmful, but it's hard to not think about the other possible scenarios. If John is associated with any of these crimes, or even if he knows any information that would help find a child like William Tyrell. Only time will tell. The sites are seemingly still getting updated, and maybe one day, one of those updates will be an answer that can finally put all of this to rest. Temple OS. It's December 1969. The dead of winter in West Allis, Wisconsin. Residents here live just a little bit outside of the booming city of Milwaukee, but it's a true suburban life that most have. And the Davis family was no different. Other than the fact that their house was packed with 6 kids running around, and on December 15th, they welcomed a beautiful baby boy to add to the mix. This man was Terry Davis. A lot of his childhood was pretty normal, but he did stand out in some ways. Besides the fact that he had such a large family, his father was also an industrial engineer who moved them all around the country. They went from Washington to Michigan, California, and Arizona, never staying in one place, always starting over. This kind of life for a child can feel unstable, never keeping the same friends, moving houses, moving schools. And while all of that was true for Terry, there was one thing that remained the same wherever he went. This was a love for computers. As soon as he could learn to read, Terry was obsessed with them. Starting in elementary school, he used an Apple II, which were a series of microcomputers. Then, as the years went by, he moved on to using the Commodore 64, a home computer that was very popular in the 80s. It was especially known as a platform to learn programming, which is exactly what Terry did. In high school, this is where he started to learn assembly language, and that was just the beginning. Once graduating high school, he went to Arizona State University and got a degree in electrical engineering. With that, he got a job at Ticketmaster, where he worked on VAX machines. Those are mini computers that are often used for research and business transactions. At this point in his life, Terry's a regular guy who's using his computer skills to make a very practical career for himself. And that is it. Terry is smart and good at his job, but there's only so much he could do there. And what most of the people around him don't realize is that Terry has potential for far greater things than what Ticketmaster can offer him. Because really, Terry is brilliant. In fact, he's pretty much genius. This really came to light in 2013 when he completed what he calls Temple OS. It's an operating system that he started making in 2003. So yeah, this took him a decade to finish. But for anyone that knows a thing about computers, 10 years isn't actually that long for what he accomplished. An operating system is what that computer runs on. It's what's in between the hardware and the programs that someone uses on a computer. A familiar example would be Windows. Temple OS runs on a programming language called Holy C, written and developed completely by Terry. It has over 120,000 lines of code. For some, this may not sound like a lot. It may even sound like a foreign language. But take a look at any programming subreddit or online community, and users say the same thing over and over again. Terry Davis is the smartest programmer who has ever lived. He's an inspiration when it comes to his godly programming abilities and knowledge. Designing an operating system plus compiler is a huge feat, especially back then when we didn't have all the resources that we do today. Like, no matter how you cut it, he was a flawed genius. Then again, geniuses tend to be unstable in some way. And that last comment is not unique. In fact, it's something that's mentioned often by others. What is it about Terry that's unstable? Well, keep scrolling through posts about him, and it won't take long to figure out. He wasn't just well known for his achievements, he also had some polarizing opinions, and a pretty controversial way of expressing them. Take, for instance, this video he made where he's just talking to himself until a black man walks by. Without hesitation, he says hi and uses the slur. You know, the one that a white person should never use. Obviously, this is incredibly offensive for the guy walking by. He stops and confronts Terry. Despite him being pretty aggressively angry, Terry defends himself and makes it seem like he did nothing wrong. The video ends before I can see what ended up happening, but at no point does he apologize. This isn't a one-time thing though. In a majority of the videos of him, he repeatedly uses these types of slurs in offensive language, mostly against African Americans. Now, this is clearly not okay. Racism isn't an excusable thing. At no point should anyone be defended for using such vile language. Admirers of Terry don't deny this, but many offer an explanation for this behavior. But to explain, we have to go back to March of 1996. Prior to that time, Terry identified as an atheist. Despite being raised Catholic, he formed his own opinions, which included that there was nothing outside of the material world, but something changed that year. And when faith in a higher power entered his life, so did the onset of something else. Something terrifying. Something that would destroy his life. It began with one manic episode that was so out of control, he was admitted to the psych ward. Then 6 months later, he would return. And another 6 months, the pattern repeated itself. And as time went on, his mental health continued to fall apart. Quickly, he started to believe that people were following him, including the CIA. Not only that they were following him, but that they could be even seen in pitch black because they glowed in the dark. He said, "The CIA N-words glow in the dark. You can see them if you're driving. You just run them over." This fear and paranoia intensified so much that he ended up taking a drive. This drive would be hundreds of miles, but with no destination. He just drove south, endlessly. That was until he grew so anxious again. This time because he thought his car radio was communicating with him. He took apart his car to try and find tracking devices that were put in there. And when he came up with nothing, he left his car on the side of the road and threw his keys away in the desert. He was desperate to get away from the voices in his head, and for a while, he felt better. But then a cop passed him, and out of concern, they put him in the passenger seat to take him somewhere more safe. The problem was that Terry didn't feel safe anywhere, especially not in this cop car. He needed to get out, and the fact that the car was literally in motion didn't matter to Terry. He escaped and jumped out anyway. Luckily, he wasn't too injured. He only broke his collarbone, which isn't nothing, but it could have been worse. But Terry didn't feel relieved. No, he was now in the hospital, and fear immediately came back. He misinterpreted artifacts in his x-ray as alien artifacts, and that was enough to send him running again, as he was running away from things that were only in his head. He managed to attempt to steal a car, get arrested, and go to jail. And then, when failing at a prison break, he was again put into a mental hospital. Here, he was finally given a diagnosis of bipolar, but later on, he was declared to have schizophrenia. It may have been this that led to some healing for Terry, because after this last trip to the psych ward, his turmoil and paranoia calmed down a little bit. Or I guess, it just became different. I was genuinely pretty crazy in a way. Now I'm not. I'm crazy in a different way maybe. I'm not especially proud of the logic and thinking. It looks very young and childish and pathetic. In the Bible it says if you seek God, he will be found of you. I was really seeking, and I was looking everywhere to see what he might be saying to me. This was in 2003, when he began creating Temple OS, and this was no coincidence. A first glance at Temple OS, and a user may think it's just a retro-looking platform to play video games, as well as upload original games yourself. In fact, Terry designed it so people could use it for coding projects, altering the OS however they wanted, but that wasn't why it was created. He designed it to be the third temple from the Hebrew Bible, which, although has never been built, is a sacred space for Jewish people. And the hope for rebuilding goes hand in hand with the idea that one day the Messiah will bring universal peace. And in some way, I think Terry created or believed that this OS could be that, or at least give that feeling of serenity. He describes it as, Temple OS is God's official temple, just like Solomon's temple. This is a community focal point where offerings are made and God's oracle is consulted. He used it as a way to directly communicate with God. He programmed a random word generator onto it. When a user would hit the keys F7, they would get a random word. And better yet, if they pressed Shift F7, a passage from the Bible would appear. Terry used this for every decision he made when building Temple OS, like when he decided to give it a low resolution. It was because God told him to do so, because it was easier for children to draw images on it. But it wasn't just using this function when programming. This was something Terry used in his daily life, something he relied on to move him through the day. This communication with God, whether it was real or not, it was something he believed 100%. Knowing this makes Temple OS feel different. Now it's unsettling. Every detail, every word, every intricacy is behind someone that's unwell. And this shows in the videos he made the years following the completion of Temple OS. During this time, he lived with his parents and spent a lot of the time live streaming and browsing the internet. Some of it is normal and can even be boring, but there'll be bits and pieces that are just concerning. In one live stream from March of 2017, Terry says, "If you get a thought, an angel can make you forget it. It's that effing oppressive." Okay, where were we? Terry then begins to laugh in this strange and almost chilling way, like there's nothing actually funny and he's really doing it out of anxiety. Like he wants to stop himself, but he can't. It gets more bizarre when he stops laughing and starts to get frustrated at his inability to remember what he was thinking. I was gonna say something. That's not funny. His live streams are full of moments like this. It's alarming, and it gets more horrifying the more I dive into Terry's digital footprint. After he finished Temple OS, he live streamed constantly. Many of those streams ended up being between 5 and 11 hours long. Sometimes he's just relaxing and scrolling through the internet, but then it spirals into a rant or a slew of offensive slurs. It's hours and hours and hours of watching someone descend into madness. And it does raise the question if there's something behind the racism that's not just, well, racism. Because clearly, Terry is suffering. His mental health never fully recovered from what happened in the 90s, and it's possible that his usage of offensive language could be a byproduct of that, especially when he often referred to the CIA as the N-word, something that he thought would defend him against the CIA. It doesn't make it excusable, but it does raise questions on why he uses it so often. But honestly, all of that turned out to be the least of his concerns. In June of 2018, his mental health took a turn for the worst again. He became homeless at the age of 48. He was offered help from fans, but he refused any food, water, or shelter that was given to him. He traveled from Arizona to California to then Portland. It was here that, on August 11th, 2018, He made a video on a bench outside a public library. "I come here and use their computer and smoke out here. They must have been freaking out because such an impure person was in their presence. Oh well, I was clueless, not nice to have a respect for purity, so, oh well, I'm going to be king. It may be, I think maybe, I'm just like a little bizarre little person who walks back and forth whatever. You know, but." He uploaded the video, and hundreds of his fans logged on to watch. They had no idea those would be his last words. That evening, Terry was walking by a train station when a Union Pacific train struck and killed him. Investigators could not confirm whether or not this was an S word or not, but it's easy for anyone to see how little life is left in Terry's eyes those hours before his death. The last 2 months of homeless life took a toll on him, let alone the years and years he spent tormented by his own brain, and actually his fan base as well. Tragically, the world will never know what it would look like to really have Terry in the world. A version of him that isn't so sick and unwell. Someone that could have used their genius and contributed huge things to the world. Hopefully, what he did give was something that could inspire generations to come of young programmers to show them that no matter the obstacle, even the impossible can be done.